Welcome, Dolphins, once again to the PFN Miami Dolphins podcast. I'm your co-host, All Freaky, here once again with my friend Adam Beasley. And today we have a special guest. Welcome back to the show, Ian Cummings. He is our PFN draft analyst. And as you guys know, we're coming fresh off the draft, talking all things Miami Dolphins draft. So welcome to the show, Ian.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's been a while, right? 2 whole weeks. So it's been fun. But
feels like forever.
I know, right? Exactly. But no, it's been fun. And this past weekend, I talked to Adam and I talked to Ali and Cam and, all through the offseason, I do a mock draft every month, I think, right? It's a lot of fun to go through the different possibilities, but it's nice to be able to breathe a little bit and review what actually happened now. So
we're going to call Ian Steph Curry because, man, he shoots at a high rate. Just a couple of stats to throw out so our audience knows they're dealing with a real champ here. Top 50 hit rate was 82%. Tell people what does that mean, Ian?
I mean, Cam knows better than I do. I think I got 41 of my top 50 guys actually went top 50, which is pretty cool. I think it was 81 of my top 100 went 100. So, it's cool. Like I said, none of these guys have played it down yet. So we got to wait a little bit, right? The hit rate right after the draft grades, they're all subjective, right? Like we've done the work, we've done the analysis, the tape watching. So we have an idea of what to expect and what to look out for, but there's still a lot left to play. So I'm going to push the brakes a little bit, but it is cool to, see that work kind of reflected.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
What this means is if Ian's wrong, so are the general managers. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I think everyone should recognize how great of a job you do. And that's why we wanted to have you on this week after the draft.
Yeah, for sure. And it's great to be here finally going through the results. And soon enough, we're going to be transitioning to 2025 eventually. But I'm going to take a vacation before then for sure. But we've got some time to review 2024 and a lot of stuff to unpack for sure.
Where's vacation? What do you do when you go away?
It varies. We do a yearly trip. We go up to Wisconsin to visit a buddy from high school. So that's what we're doing in May this year. So it'll be fun. I'm driving this year, so I got to get the playlist set up and everything. But the 7 hours, and we're going way up there. We're gonna visit some brewing companies, and I don't drink a ton, but I'm gonna be the passenger for that trip, and then we're just gonna hang out a little bit. It's gonna be fun.
That sounds like my type of trip. I love a driving vacation, and it's especially important for you because you can't possibly watch any tape while you're driving to Wisconsin, right?
Exactly. I'm blocking that whole week off.
You have to relax.
No tape. Exactly.
What I'm hearing here is that next time I'm going to Napa, I'm bringing Ian because he'll be my designated driver.
There we go. Hey. I'll sign up. I'll be your guy for sure.
After my draft trip, the thought of drinking right now is just not settling well very much.
Okay, but yeah, before we get into the Dolphins draft, we got to kind of pour one out for Adolf Freaky here. Right? I mean, you had a rough Thursday. Did you hear the story, Ian?
I did not hear the story. No.
So Adolf Freaky got left the draft area and then got stuck on the outside and couldn't get back in, and so I totally missed the first round of the draft.
Oh my gosh! Oh, no.
I was beside myself. So we thought we had plenty of time, like 4:30. We were like, let's just go. I'm actually going to blame this on Eminem because I went in search of Eminem's mom's spaghetti restaurant. Everyone's like, that's what you have to do. The spaghetti sucks, but you have to go and, find this place. So I'm like, okay, we got a couple hours before the draft. It really wasn't very packed yet. There's plenty of room out there. And so, we go out, we're looking for food and drinks. And then we're getting these things on our phone, like, certain gates have reached capacity. And so we're like, okay, we better go back now. So we go back. And as we're ready to get in the gate, they totally maxed out the event. And they said they're not letting anyone else in until tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm freaking out. I'm calling Adam. I'm calling everyone. I'm like, can somebody get me some sort of credentials to get in here? Because they'll let you in with a certain pass. They'll let you in with a hospitality pass or, if you're staff or whatever. We're outside trying to bribe people. Like, hey, can I borrow your pass? I just got to get in. Nothing worked. So we ended up watching the first round of the draft from a crowded bar. And I'm like, I came all the way to Detroit to watch it in a bar. So I was angry.
Well, obviously that's an awful outcome for you. You did go you did go Friday, right?
Yes. So we did get in Friday. We made sure we got there early enough. And of course it wasn't as packed, for the second round, but I didn't have inner circle or any access like that. So we kind of were in the wait line. They did have an overflow type of thing. So when people left the inner circle, you could be in this queue. And so at one point, one of the employees came and was like, hey, we're looking for Dolphin fans to go in. to the draft theater, like, can you get in this line? And we're like, yeah, of course. But at that point it was cold. We were still drunk. Like, we had to go to the bathroom. We were hungry. So we were waiting in this line, and, our pick wasn't until like 55. And so it's like in the 40s now. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, how much longer can I stay in this line? And we had another party to be at, afterwards. So we ended up just ditching the line and just, waiting it out. And we watched our pick, and then we went off to our party. So, I can at least say I was in there for the second round.
The life of Dolph Freaky is just well beyond my
It's chaotic.
It really is.
It's chaotic mostly because, like, as soon as we got there, there was tons and tons of fans. I mean, I know you guys saw that crowd, and fans from all over the NFL. And I have so many friends in different fan bases. So it was just like, we were go, go, go. I think we slept like 12 hours the whole weekend, and it was such a great time and so fun to be able to welcome our new Dolphins. So I was happy to be there.
Yeah, it was fun.
Well,
my older brother was there. My older brother was there, and he was saying the numbers were crazy and everything. And I know Lions fans, being in Michigan, the excitement around the Lions now has kind of increased that too. So it's definitely, it was cool to be that hub this year. But now, we're going to see it carried over next year.
You could definitely tell their excitement, and those Lions fans came out in numbers, and they were all so welcoming. That was like the one thing that a lot of people were like, oh, don't go to Detroit. Like, that's not a good city to visit. Be careful. I will tell you, at no time did I feel unsafe. Everyone was so over the top friendly. I must have taken pictures with 1,000 Lions fans. They were all so hype about their team, and it's nice to see that. I can't wait till we get a draft in Miami.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen.
No?
No. Well, first of all, I don't know if Miami fans would turn out like that. They're not quite the same as Midwestern fans, A. And
it's
B.
True, you're right.
And B, it's really this traveling draft. It's for cities that aren't going to get a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So it's like one or the other. Like all these Midwestern cities that's great in April. That's what their big event will be. And then the Super Bowl is, I mean, if you build a new stadium like Detroit did, they'll get one. Yeah. But beyond that, they're not going to be in the rotation anymore. So LA's, Vegas's, New Orleans, Atlanta's, Miami's, they'll probably never get a draft just because they get the Super Bowl.
Interesting. Yeah, that was some good feedback we had from the Lions fans too, is that, they were thankful to have that event there in that city because that contributed to a lot of growth in the city, a lot of renovations, and obviously it was great, tourism and all of that for them. So I wish we could get one in Miami though. That would be so fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to stand outside for 4 hours in 90-degree heat. That might be
That's a different story. Yeah. We did have, it was cooler weather and it was a little bit refreshing to be out there, but I was happy when I got off my plane and I got back here in Florida. I'm like, thank you, God, for letting me live here because it's just it's like a warm hug when you step off your flight.
Just rubbing salt in the wound with Ian, who digs himself out.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I like the cold better. I used to have family in Florida, so I'd go down there every now and then. I can't get past the humidity, man. It's too much for me. It's too much.
Some people
I like some modest cold, like some cool weather. That's like 50 degrees. That's my sweet spot. So I'm cool with it.
Well, I left that life behind.
We get that like 4 days a year.
Yeah.
You guys
let's
want to talk
draft? Yeah, let's do it. So we have 7 new Miami Dolphins. Welcome to the squad, guys. We're happy to have you. So shall we just go pick by pick and discuss each one?
Let's do it.
All right. So with our first round pick, we selected at 21, Chop Robinson, edge from Penn State. Let's go Penn State. I know all my friends back home are happy, and as we are too. So Ian, give us your thoughts on that selection by the Dolphins.
Yeah, for sure. I liked it for sure. I think the value is there. And we heard inklings that they were maybe going to target an edge in round 1, even though they have Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. Injuries have been a concern with both of them, right? And Chubb is getting older too. So you want to hedge for that. It's a premier position. I definitely understand getting a talent like Chop Robinson in that room. Chop Robinson, the upside is immense with him, right? There's still some room for refinement. I think, fleshing out that pass rushing arsenal a little bit more, but every tool in the toolbox that you want, he's got it. 6'3", 254. He's got 32.5-inch arms. So that compact power profile is very appealing. He can just explode inside the torso against tackles and blast them off their center of gravity. And then he is explosive, probably the most explosive edge in his class. He's right up there with Dallas Turner in that regard. Ran a 4.48 40-yard dash. I think he had I was doing some research when I was cross-checking, and he had a 10-yard split that was faster than some cornerbacks. So guys who are like 50 pounds lighter than him, and he's getting off the line quicker, right? So that kind of shows you how explosive he is, how easy it is for him to accelerate. He's got the speed around the arc. He's got very good bend and ankle flexion as well. I think every tool that you need, he's got it. And I think early on, if you're Anthony Weaver, if you can be creative with him, he can be an alignment versatile, disruptive force. There were reps where he was playing a 7-tech, wide 9, but there were also reps on his college film where he's playing shaded 0-tech and 1-tech and winning against centers and guards with that lateral agility and those forceful hands. So there is a lot of potential here. And I think right away, there's a way to integrate him that allows him to do different things. And I really like the potential there, right? You don't want to refine his hand usage a little more, but I love the upside. I love the potential if you could be creative. That's the key word. So still some work to do, but I'm all on board with getting an elite pass rushing trio, and I think he can give you that.
The casuals looked at his stat sheet and were like, oh, what, 11 and a half or whatever career sacks. What are we doing in the first round? Certainly his pressure rate is off the chart.
Yeah.
That guy gets pressure on the quarterback. The comp that Chris Greer had for us was Danielle Hunter. I mean, Hunter didn't have a ton of sacks in college either, and has turned into one of the better edge defenders in football. What history beyond Hunter do you have of players who don't have a ton of production in college, but then go on to be great pros?
Yeah, and there's not a ton of it, which is, it's important to be honest about the trepidation here, which is that he hasn't converted pressure to sacks a lot of time, right? But like you said, the pressure ratio, the pressure rate is very high with him. I think that's one thing that gets overlooked because you look at the surface level stats and you want guys to have 10 sacks, 15 tackles for loss, right? You want that. Chop Robinson doesn't quite have that. But then you look at the pressure rate and how often is he making the QB uncomfortable, right? Very often. How often is he forcing the QB off his spot and maybe contributing to other sacks, right? Very often. So, I think the impact, the gravity that he has right now carries more weight than his actual ability as a sack artist right now. And part of that is just finishing, right? Finish, use your hands, use your reach, close in, use those counter moves to really decouple and win those second effort moves as well. So there's still room for him to improve that. But if you're looking for a guy, again, who can make the QB uncomfortable early on, I think if you're Miami, you already have a lot of guys on that defensive line who can finish, right? Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, some interior guys as well. I would have liked them to strengthen the interior a little bit more in this draft, but, Zach Sealer is still there, right? They got Tyre Tart, who has some ability as well. So I think you do have guys who can play off of Chop, and right away, Chop is a guy that makes other players around you better. And we saw that at Penn State. Adisa Isaac, a lot of their defensive linemen, right, were able to play a little bit freer in pursuit because Chop Robinson is just such a disruptive force. So the key for him will be growing beyond that pure disruption and translate that to production. And there aren't too many examples of that, right? You do want to see some improvement there, but you also don't have a ton of athletic profiles like this, right? That's the other caveat. The guy ran a 4.48 at 6'3", 254 pounds, right? I'd seen some comps from guys, who have NFL background, and they're looking at this first step and like, hey, there's some Dwight Freeney if he can get to his maximum ceiling, right? Because no one gets off the line that quickly and is that powerful, that compact. So I think the upside is through the roof. There's some projection to get to that point, but it's something I'm willing to see through because the potential is so high.
I like it. I like the fast, twitchy explosiveness that I've seen on his tape. It makes me a little uncomfortable watching him pick apart these quarterbacks, so I'm excited to have him on the team. Welcome to the team, Pork Chop. That's a fun fact. Did you guys know why he's called Chop?
Pork Chop, I assume.
Pork Chop was the name because he was 11 pounds at birth, okay? I gave birth to 8-pound babies, and that was enough. I can't imagine 11-pounder, but right off the back, you're going to have a football player on your hands.
I think you're selling him short. I think he was 14 pounds at birth.
No,
That's what
yeah. Why did I read 11? 14, yeah, get out of here. That's impossible. Well, anyway, so moving on.
Yeah. So certainly there is a lot of upside in their first pick. Their second pick, meanwhile, I think has the moon's the upside, right? I mean, you're talking about a projection pick and Patrick Paul. Some of his tape makes you scratch your head a little bit as to why he went at 55. But then when you look at his measurables and his arms are like, I mean, they're he should be in the Fantastic Four, right? I mean, he is. he's got length for days. Give us your insight into what do you think of Patrick Paul as a player, and what do you think about the value at 55?
Yeah, for sure. So that was one of those picks that, I knew my big board was probably going to be a little different from. There was a lot of buzz leading up to the draft that Patrick Paul was one of those guys that the NFL was just higher on than a lot of the media, right? He was an early to mid day 3 value for me, and they got him at 55. So it was a little bit of a reach on my board. But like you said, the physical talent is through the roof. 6'7", 330 pounds, 36-inch arms. The dude is massive. I mean, a lot of times there are a lot of reps in pass protection where rushers just can't get around him. And that's the end of the rep, right? He's just so wide. His reach is so long that it's so tough to get around him. And then when he does latch onto you, that anchor strength is legitimate. I mean, we saw it at the Senior Bowl, right? There were times when he was able to latch an anchor and just suffocate reps right there, right? So, you have the explosive capacity, you have the power, you have the strength as well. For me, the biggest hang up with me is that a guy who started 44 games across 5 years in college, right? And still needs a lot of technical improvement. I do think he improved his footwork in 2023, but his hand usage to me, is still pretty rough. And you want to, it's not just the technical element, it's also just the movement speed, right? The pace of play. When you're an offensive tackle, right? Generally, when you're in your stance, you want your elbows to be tucked in, at your sides, not too high, not too low, because that way you can stay within your opponent's torso, and you also have that load, that power load, the energy load, where you can load up that potential energy and just shoot forward, right? But when Patrick Paul engages, a lot of the time, he brings his arms wide like this and swings around, right? And so when you do that, you give rushers a window to just attack right inside the torso and get that power rush. And then you're just down after that. So, there's a lot of work to do with his stance and his loading. And for a guy who has that much experience, I would have liked to see more progression to this point. So I think he's still pretty raw relative to his age, and also the athletic testing, right? He put up good numbers, but on tape, there are some concerns that I have with the recovery flexibility, right? The malleability. His frame is a little high cut. Sometimes he can lurch over his center of gravity. Sometimes it's a little harder for him to make quick transitions laterally to recover ground. So there is a lot to work on with Patrick Paul. And I don't love the scheme fit in the running game, because he's not always the best at transitioning and getting out of his stance, right? And really kind of sustaining his strides and getting in space. But as a pass protector, I do think he can obstruct enough where, that passing scheme is very O-line friendly. Tua gets the ball out quick, right? He's accurate. So I think those elements of it can do a good thing. But I think Patrick Paul, my ideal scenario is that he sits for most of his rookie year behind Teron Armstead. You got good high upside insurance to tackle, right? So that's a win. But I do think there's a lot of work to do. So let him do that work early on. And maybe if he can hone that behind the scenes, you have a solid starter in 2025.
Interesting. Yeah. So, at least we have at least one more year with Armstead that he can learn from. So moving on to our third pick of the draft, the Dolphins chose Jalen Wright, running back out of Tennessee. And for many, this was a surprise. We didn't expect to be picking a running back, and especially trading up. We gave the Eagles a 2025 third round pick in exchange. So what are your thoughts on this? This, as a fan, this was a little bit surprising to me.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising to me, but then I remember Jalen Wright is a running back who has speed. So, there was a good chance that he was going to end up with Mike McDaniel, right? But he's definitely a good scheme fit for sure because of that speed. And I think, looking at the rookie year that Devon Achane had, or Achane, I think is how you pronounce it. Devon Achane was very good when he was healthy, but availability is the most important ability, right? And he struggled to stay healthy at times. Raheem Mostert is getting older. I know they still have him under contract for a little bit, but he is getting older. So having some insurance in the RB room, again, round 4, I can understand it. Trading a third next year, I don't understand it quite as much, but I do think the ability is there. And I think, again, the perfect scheme fit in that system. We saw runs in college at Tennessee where, once he had a lane, that vertical speed is just angle breaking. Right away, he can just get upfield, flip the field, and he's gone. There's no catching up to this guy. So the long strider acceleration, the speed is there. I think in general, he's a good creator. He has good vision. I think he could be a little bit more consistent with that vision on cutback lanes. But overall, is a guy who knows how to slash at the second level, kind of press upfield behind blocks and clear space, and then capitalize with that game-breaking speed. And he's got some pretty wiry play strength as a contact threat too. So I think there's a lot to like with Jalen Wright, and also just kind of a utility thing. But on day 3, you're never going to be uncomfortable putting him out there on pass protection. downs. He's a very good pass protector. He squares up. He engages with his hands. Very, very good at protecting the QB in the pocket. He can manage gaps as well. So that's another security thing, but it is important. So I think in general, you've got another pretty good dynamic catalyst for your RB rotation. If Achane struggles to stay healthy, Jalen Wright can come in a pinch and give you that speed as well. And then he's a good protector. He's a good receiving threat as well. I think in general, it was a good pick. Giving away that third rounder in 2025, a little rich for me because those are valuable. But again, I like the fit. I think that can counteract that.
Yeah, I know there's been some pushback to that very point that it was trading a third for a 2024 fourth. That's not great business. What have you seen historically? Have those trades usually worked out, or they've kind of failed?
I'll be honest, I got to study up some more on the history there. But what I do know is that I do think we overinflate the value of current picks relative to future picks, right? Because again, you have a round 3 pick next year. Like that's good. Like that could be a really good player. And we know that next year's class is going to be very deep again, because this is the last class with the COVID year, right? So a lot of players that could have declared this year ended up going back. So we're going to see more depth on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball. And I think that if you trade away future capital, right, you miss out on a chance to do that. So a lot of teams kind of fall into certain buckets. Some teams like to trade away later capital for current capital. Some teams are willing to kick the can a little bit and amass capital in later years. And I'll have to do some more studying. Maybe I'll have more time in the offseason to kind of figure out if there's a correlation with success. But just me as a draft evaluator, I know how much talent there is every year. And I would rather keep those picks in the future, right? So maybe play the board a little bit, be patient, because there were a lot of good running backs still on the board at that point. So, I know speed is a thing that's unique to Mike McDaniel. He really likes that. But at the same time, was it worth giving up that capital? I would lean no, but you can make it worth it if you put him in a position to succeed.
Especially when you already have 5 running backs on the roster. That I think that's what really threw people.
They do have projected 3 third-round picks next year, so it's like they had a little bit of slack to play with. But yeah, I agree. They're going to have to hit on that pick, or else it's going to look like a bad trade.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, at least I think we can say pretty confidently that they have confidence in this Jalen Wright move. So whatever the Dolphins think is right, we'll just move on with it. So with our 4th pick at 158, we took Mohamed Kamara, from the edge from Colorado State. So a lot of people are excited about this pick. What are your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think they have an edge rotation that's very strong from 1 to 4, I think. And Mohamed Kamara was one of my top candidates to go day 3 and just be a really solid depth guy. He's a little undersized. That's the one thing with him, around 6'1", I think close to 250. He's got 32 3/8 inch arms though. So he's got pretty proportional length for his size, and he's very compact, well built, so you see that power profile that comes up. He's not the biggest guy, but he can get under you. He can channel through, and he's got good play strength for his size. So a lot of things to like. And then beyond that too, very explosive first step. I think he ran in the 4.5s, the NFL Combine, which that shows up. He's very quick off the line. He's got the speed to thread to the apex, and he's got pretty good bend capacity too. I think for his size, not quite elite bend capacity. So that's what knocked him down a little bit for me, because I don't see that being a trump card at the NFL level, but he still has good ankle flexion. He can sustain acceleration around the arc, and he's one of the more tenacious, one of the more workman-like pass rushers out there. He has a very, very good hand usage arsenal, a lot of moves, a lot of counters as well. So I think right away he can be a spark plug as a pass rushing threat. He fits the scheme very well with his ability to rush from space at 9 tech, right? And then at the same time too, he is a physical run defender. Again, I wouldn't want him setting the front side edge every single play, but I do think he's one of those guys who's going to compete. He's going to get in there. He's going to get his nose dirty, and he will shock offensive linemen at contact with that first step and that power. So I like him a lot as a rotational edge who could end up becoming more, and maybe being a pass rushing catalyst for you if he needs to be. I think it's a very good pick with, a decent amount of upside and not too much downside. High floor, high ceiling.
Oh, good.
Yeah, day 3, they seem to have a lot of guys that were, fell, I guess, not to put it a better way, like they, value picks because, a lot of people in the consensus boards had them much higher. Another pick that the Dolphins absolutely loved internally, you saw Mike McDaniel's face just completely light up when he was still available. Yeah. At pick 184 is Malik Washington. He's a guy, in my mind, who could have a chance to really contribute as a rookie.
Yeah, he was my 75th overall player. So to get him in round 6 was pretty impressive. I was a big fan of that fit. One of my favorite players in the draft. I know his size is going to be it was a deal breaker for a lot of teams, right? 5'8", 190. He's really compact, but he is shorter. He's got shorter arms as well. So not a guy who's going to win in a lot of contested situations. That said, he was an absolute target funnel at Virginia. He broke their receiving records this past year. And every time they came his way, he could separate over the middle of the field, right? He could separate from the slot. And when they did give him chances against contact over the middle, he's a tough guy. He'll play beyond his frame. He'll jump for passes. He'll sell out and he'll make those catches. He's a good rack threat too. I think he's very compact, burly, low to the ground, agile, explosive. And we saw all of that at the Shrine Bowl, right? That was an event where he came to that event and there was a lot of talent on tap and he dominated through 3 days, one-on-ones. No one could cover this guy. Explosive, but also channels that explosive athleticism with really detailed, precise route running, right? Very aggressive, very violent with his movements. And then he can also, bait DBs into oversetting and capitalize with that angle breaking speed. So Malik Washington, to me, was one of the better purely slot candidates in the draft. He's probably going to be confined to a slot receiver, but I think he can be a very, very good slot receiver. So the fact that he can play off of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill early on, to me, that's a perfect situation for him. I think he runs a lot of the routes that McDaniel likes to implement in his scheme, and he can be a rack threat too if you want him to be. So I think it was a perfect pick. It was a great value as well. Ideally, the one thing that Miami lacked at wide receiver, right? They still kind of lack it, is having a size guy who can be a utility blocker for you if you need him to be. So I would have liked them to invest a little bit more in that. But Malik Washington can be such a good fit that I'm willing to overlook it because he's a phenomenal football player. And I think he'll be a 3-level weapon right from day one.
Yeah, I think the pick looks a lot better if they go and get an Odell in free agency, somebody like that who can give them that size you're talking about. On the outside, we'll get to their final pick in a sec, but who's another wide receiver who has a similar last name, an identical last name. But real quick, Patrick Morris, that to me was a pick that was off a lot of boards, right? The safety out of California, they got him at pick 198. I had not heard of that guy before they selected him.
I'd done some ancillary research on him. I didn't get a chance to get a grade on him, unfortunately. But from what I've seen, I think there is some potential there. I think he's a guy who is pretty versatile. I think mainly in coverage is where you see his utility because he's very fluid, very fast feet, very fluid transitions as well for his size. And I think he's over 200 pounds too. So he's got a strong frame. I think he can hold up a contact. Doesn't have elite range, but I think you're looking at a guy who can play a number of different roles in those underneath hook zones, right? He can play too high. He can play a little bit of off-man nickel if you need him to. I think that fluidity really helps him out there. The question is the ultimate upside with that. But I think as a utility defensive back who has some coverage versatility and some playmaking ability as well, I think he had some really nice ball production in college. So I think that bodes well for him. So utility defender with some playmaking chops and some versatility, some fluidity. That's kind of the profile that I got for Patrick McMorris when I watched him. So I think round 6, round 7, decent value for him. And if I remember correctly, they got some intriguing defensive backs in the UDFA pool as well. So they stocked that position. I think they have a lot to work with.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's good to have some depth behind our new boy Poyer. Mm-hmm. And we know we're potentially losing Holland next year to free agency. Hopefully not. We love him. So we'll see how that pans out. And then with the Dolphins' last pick at 241, we took the other Washington, Taj, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Washington receiver out of USC. So thoughts on him?
Yeah, for sure. He's mainly more of a rack threat. I think Malik Washington has a little bit more complete of a route tree right now. I think he's a little bit better holding up at the catch point, but Taj Washington had some of the more impressive reps in that USC wide receiver room. I know Brendan Rice had a lot of the appeal because of his size, his vertical speed, right? But Taj Washington, to me, again, has the athletic profile that translates really well in McDaniel's offense. He's very twitched up. He's very agile, but he's explosive too. And he can use that on the rack plane, but he can also, make some guys miss and separate a little bit, right? So I think not quite as refined or as strong as Malik Washington, but still has that agility, that explosion to be a rack threat, a design touch guy early on, and then potentially could become more later on. This is a pick where maybe if you're going to double up a wide receiver, again, get that size guy, right? There were a few guys on the board that I would have taken that had some blocking utility, right? But also, some contested catch ability as well. But, I'm not going to hate it because Taj Washington's a great player, right? The only concern I have is you might get him confused, you're calling plays like, oh, Taj, get out there. No, Malik, get out there, right? That could be an element. But there were like 3 receivers with the last name Washington in this class because Taj, Malik, and then Casey Washington went to the Falcons as well. So a little confusing, but for Miami specifically, I think you got 2 guys who really fit the offense and have that upside for sure.
Well, with the team with 9 Jalen's or whatever it is,
Yeah.
I don't think the Dolphins are. That's not Washington is not their number one concern. Confusion. Okay.
We like our Jalen's and we like our Washingtons and our Patricks.
If you get a Jalen Washington, that's when it's going to be. That'll be too much. That'll be too much.
That would be.
What do you think overall? I know, like, I think the consensus ranking / grade for the Dolphins was like 23rd of their draft class. Does that kind of fall where you see how they did?
I would probably put them in the middle of the pack or so. That Patrick Paul pick was a big reach for me. If I have to criticize one thing, that would probably be it. He was the guy that I would wait until day 3 to pick, just because an older guy who doesn't have the best corrective framework, recovery framework, who also needs a lot of refinement with his hand usage. That was a concern to me. I get the athletic profile, I get the upside, and he's got the good physical temperament as well, but there is a lot of work to do. So that was a little too rich for me personally. And there were a few guys on the board that had tackle guard versatility as well. So maybe you can play them at guard early on. I don't see that same utility with Paul, right? So that was something that the Dolphins also passed up. There was another thing. I think they could have invested more in the interior line on both sides of the ball. They didn't get any guards. They didn't get any defensive tackles. I would have liked them to address that. It felt like they were really picking guys they liked, which is okay, right? Trading up for Jalen Wright. If you like a guy and you have a plan for him, a vision for him, that can yield great results. But they also pass up on a few needs that I think could become even more pressing down the line. So that's my concern. I do think they did some good things. Chop was a very good pick. Malik Washington was a phenomenal pick. And I think those day 3 picks in general, there's a lot of good things to look forward to with those guys. But mainly the round 2 pick, spending it on that guy who went too early, I wonder if that could have a cascading effect down the line. But in general, I thought they did okay. We'll see the returns later on.
Yeah, they've got, I think, $18.5 million freeing up on June 2nd with the Xavier Howard contract coming off their books. There are guards still available in free agency, Dalton Reisner, etc. I think they are going to still sign a veteran wide receiver. I think they do need a little bit more safety help. But to me, this was a draft for 2025 for the Miami Dolphins, that they see that there's going to be a talent cliff for them because they're going to run into a hard, brick wall of the salary cap very, very soon. And so I think a lot of these picks for them projecting, okay, this is probably going to be the last year with Mostert. This is almost certainly going to be the last year for Teron Armstead. It might be Tyreek's last year with the Dolphins. If we can have not plug and play, but really promising ascending players in place to replace them, I think that was the philosophy they had this draft.
Yeah, for sure. And if you draft for 2025 or a couple years in advance, that could give you cap flexibility down the line when you need to make those moves. I think the Dolphins are one of the teams that we've seen. They are willing to make cuts a little early in players' contracts just to get that cap freedom and just to start resetting the clock a little bit earlier, right? So I think their flexibility and their willingness to be flexible could allow them to make the most of this class, right? It's a more future-minded class, but again, it's one that you're willing to see through because the Dolphins have proven over the past few years that they know how to do this.
One last question for me, and then I'll cede the floor to you, Allie. Who won the draft? Who had the best draft class in your mind?
Who won the draft? That's a good question. I mean, I think the Bears didn't have a ton of picks, but I think the way that Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, come on, that's just a game-breaking duo. And then they got Kieran Amagaji at 75, who was the top 60 guy for me. Liked his potential a lot. He can play tackle or guard. And then they traded back in and got Austin Booker, very good edge player as well. I liked what they did. The Chiefs got phenomenal value again. Jared Wiley on day 3. Come on, he was a top 100 guy for me. Jaden Hicks was too. So I love the value they got. The Commanders had a phenomenal day too. I would have taken Drake May at QB, but I can understand the fit with Jaden Daniels. And I think Ben Sinnott, Mike Sanderstill, Johnny Newton. I mean, that day 2 was incredible. Those are 3 of my favorite prospects, and they got all of them. So those are a few teams. I think the Vikings and the Lions did very good as well. But those few in general, I think they really hit the nail on the head and got the best value.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for joining us. Thank you for all your expertise, not only on this pod, but the one previous as well. It's always a joy to have you. Adam, thank you so much again. Guys, you can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast. If you guys ever have questions, we're potentially looking at some mailbag type podcasts for later on when things get a little quiet. So if you guys ever have questions, feel free to send them and we'll potentially address them during our podcast. So thanks again, Doll fans, for watching, and we'll see you next time.